What's the most ducked up thing a family member of yours has done? NSFW. One of my uncles borrowed $20,000 from my other more successful uncle to start a business and refuses to pay his more successful brother back because he's got so much money already. The more successful uncle refuses to sue him because that's not what family does. But they are no longer on speaking terms. Not as bad as some of things on this thread, but this was a D move. I asked my uncle, who is a mechanic, if he could install new belt on my Honda since it would be much cheaper than taking it to a shop. He told me he would do it for me. I just had to buy the parts. Bought the parts. Took the car to him and came back a few hours later. He told me he was finished and I paid him $200 for a $450 job, which was dope. A few days later my cousin texts me a picture of some parts that his dad asked him to put on eBay. They were all the parts that he said he installed on my car. My cousin thought they may be from me since he knew what job his dad was doing for me. I called my uncle and he denied it firmly. I still had the receipt and matched the barcodes to the ones on my receipt, so they were clearly mine. My cousin, who is also a mechanic, installed them for free for me a week later. Uncle still denies it and kept my $200. Don't talk to that pleb anymore even if he's around at family gatherings. Edit. While this blew up and for everyone wondering, you have to remove a ton of parts to get to the belts in a 2002 Honda Accord, so you can't necessarily see what work he did. Plus I'm deaf, not a mechanic, so I honestly don't know. Well, I have an uncle who always beat his wife. So on one occasion she got into her car and ran him over multiple times. Broken leg, foot, ribs, collarbone, etc. He ended up staying at my dad's house for something like 9 months while he recovered. They got back together. He told her, well, yeah, finally got me back, yeah itch. My grandfather had my grandma change her will to cut out my mom 2 years after my grandma had developed full-blown dementia. Sister didn't inform me of my father's death and funeral. Ducking cunt. My aunt married a guy a few years back. He was a pathological liar and lied about literally everything for no reason. Tried to convince everyone he was in the military black ops and that there was no record of him because it was secret. He also did a lot of other ducked up stuff like threatening our family members and friends, and other things. He actually even tried to kill my uncle and my 2 cousins, but got his ass properly beat down with a baseball bat. Long story short, my aunt ended up divorcing him later cause he was an all-around ducking cunt, and he came to her house, rang the doorbell, then shot himself in the head with a handgun right on her doorstep. Real ducked up. Edit. It wasn't Jason Blaha. Edit 2. No, I don't mean they got divorced after he offed himself. They divorced and a couple months later he did the thing. My brother threatened to kick in my front door and kill me. 6 mo pregnant. My husband and 2-year-old son. He had stolen the phone I had purchased for my dad and I turned it off. He wanted me to turn it back on. Meth is bad. Kids. My cousin tried choking me to death when I was like 6. He also loosened the bolts and put me coffee table. Told me to lay under it and hit it so it fell on me. Killed the nerves in my 2 front teeth and had to get them pulled out. But now that fat bastard can't walk and has to wear diapers while spiraling into depression. So it all turned out well in the end. My dad's wife told me that he was dead when he wasn't. I only found out months later when a relative said he'd recently had an operation and was doing well. I emailed her and said I believe dad has perked up a bit. She didn't respond. So tough to decide. There's my grandmother who divorced my grandfather and married his brother, making her my great aunt. There's the other grandmother who showed up to my grandfather's funeral drunk, dressed like a $2 prostitute, cussed out the family, and nearly knocked the casket over. There's the 3 convicted child molesters, and then dozen non-convicted child molesters because it was a different time then and that kind of thing was kept in the family. There's the stepfather that tried to murder my pregnant mother. There's the cousin who shot himself in front of his kids. There's the guy who was caught ducking a goat. There's the guy who would give his kids booze on fishing trips to keep them quiet. All the kids were 5 and under. My sister, then 7 years old, tried to kill our newborn brother because she was jealous. So, take your pick on which one is the most ducked up thing. I have an uncle who molested his daughter and several of my other female cousins. H is not around anymore. A cousin of mine put a switchblade to my throat when I was about 8 to scare the it out of me. It worked. Almost literally. I had a cousin who was addicted to heroin and his parents were always doing stuff to bail him out and keep him from being homeless. One time they put down a deposit and paid rent for a furnished apartment for him. He ended up selling the furniture for drug money. Another time they rented a mobile home for him and couldn't figure out why the water bill was so high. Turns out he was charging his homeless friends $1 to take a bath shower and that was going on pretty much around the clock. My sisters used to pretend to put me in the oven. Apparently, I was only about 3 at the time. I don't remember. They put me in a wok and seasoned me. Stole my brothers and my inheritance from our grandfather to us. Land, property and cash. Because we're half-breeds. My sister who ran away from home once put my cat in the refrigerator when she was in high school. What kind of psycho it? My grandmother said she needed a place to stay one night due to issues with her housemate. She slept on the couch for the next 10 years. Made no effort to get her own place despite having a very good retirement income and still working part-time as a nurse. Loved to hit the casino though. Not a family member, but my sister's ex-fiance registered sign really charmed everyone in the beginning. We thought he was the sweetest southern gentleman you've ever met. Fast forward a year later. He got my sister into drugs. They lost all their money and moved in with my mom. He would abuse my sister and my mom. My mom wasn't really a hoarder, but she had a lot of things in her home. This man was a neat freak. So while my mom would be at work, he would clean out the house by throwing her belongings into the trash can outside and setting it on fire. These belongings included my late father's things that were sentimental, like his clothes. Also any and all picture albums of our family growing up. He threw away and burned everything. I have no pictures of my dad or myself from when I was younger anymore. We had 2 dogs. One was a German Shepherd from when my dad was alive and one Chihuahua we adopted. He took the Chihuahua and threw her out the window on the side of the road. He let the Shepherd loose out of the house and called animal control about a stray dog. I think that hurt the worst because we had those dogs for years. My mom loved him in the beginning so she gave him my father's wedding ring because they were going to marry. He pawned that for money. He also sold my laptop for drugs. I blamed my sister for everything for a long time. I let her borrow rent money once, but little did I know that she was going to use it for drugs. She ended up leaving him, but they do have a beautiful child together. That's the only good thing about the whole situation. He isn't always will be a monster. My grandfather married his stepdaughter. My mom married a convinced child molester and would bring him with her to work, a job where there were unsupervised children. My brother stole $500 from my mom yesterday while we were away. She pays his car insurance and has looked the other way when he's taken stuff before. But this was her final straw. At the time, my 19-year-old cousin got me, 16M, drunk and made me eat out her best friend and her. The thing is, I have no recollection of this at all. Not until my cousin told me about it like 10 years later. She just told me about it a few weeks ago, but I'm still skeptical about it happening. I thought my family wasn't too bad, but this was pretty ducked up, especially for me. This whole thread seems like a season of Law and Order. Dad got with my 17-year-old friend when I was 14. They have a whole family together. 14 years later, my sister-in-law was originally dating my oldest male cousin. She started cheating on him at some point with his brother. Now, she has a kid with both brothers and is in a long-term relationship with the younger one. My cousin molested me for 15 years. I could go on forever, baby. Buried all my clothes in the woods. My sister talked my ex-husband into suing me for full custody at the exact moment I was unable to contest it. Properly because I had just suffered a huge loss at month 9 of my pregnancy. She also farded his case with lies to make me look like a terrible mother, while simultaneously patting me on the back and consoling me that he was a terrible man. He didn't win, but the case made things contentious for us for years and made it impossible to grieve with my now husband, because I was in survival mode to make sure I didn't lose my daughter. My cousin killed his brother and father. He got up one morning, had a glass of milk, I guess it was soured, because he said they were trying to poison him. He shot my uncle in his bed and then went after Robert. When police arrived, he tried to say that Robert had killed his father and that he took the gun away from him and killed him in self-defense. However, the only place on the gun they could find Robert's prints were on the end of the gun barrel, like he had tried to push it away. He is currently doing life without parole in the Oklahoma prison system. If anyone wants, I will link you to his prison page and the articles from the shooting. During my father-in-law's unexpected sickness and death, my brother-in-law got greedy. While my wife was staying with my Phil at the hospital, my Bill proceeded to loot my Phil of as many of his earthly possessions as he could load up and took it all to his house. My wife has never been allowed to go through these personal possessions. After moving my Phil to hospice, to cover his tracks, my Bill proceeded to tell the entire family that I had stolen large amounts of money from my Phil. There was no truth to this whatsoever in any shape, form or fashion. And in fact, after my Phil's death, my Bill embezzled the estate fund's $50K from the account. My wife ended up suing him and he had to return half. This act tore the family apart, all because of greed. It's been 6 years and I think about it every day. Still. My uncle shot and killed his wife and her boyfriend. Then he made a treehouse and hid out for a few months. My grandfather once stabbed this chick like 20+ times. She lived and she didn't press charges. Nario through a copyright airing. Last week my mother and sister were visiting. They're both pieces of work, but they've never done anything that itty. One day I go out shopping with my sister, who is 13, and we got talking about her dad, my former stepdad. When we stopped by a candy store, I tell her, "Don't you hate it when Jason, her dad, takes his tax?" My sister looked at me really funny and asked me to elaborate. I tell her about how he used to demand 15% of everything I got when I was living with my parents while they were married. 15% of my Halloween candy. 15% of my money from my lemonade stand when I was 9. 15% of my tip and wage from my waitressing job when I was 18, on top of paying rent, about $700 a month. He even demanded my food when I made dinner. I have specific allergies, so I needed to eat separate food from my family. These aren't the only things he's done, but they're the most cheap. My sister was shocked and I realized he had only ever done it to me. It was quite jarring to realize I was the only one he was targeting. My dad attempting to get into a car and smash into my mum while driving. He had thought she was cheating when really she just went to visit some friends late at night. Got early Alzheimer's father to sign a loan putting the house up, then purposefully defaulted, resulting in mother to be evicted. Mother and father ended up in separate homes and died a year apart. Took all the insurance money and left the grave without a stone. Special place in hell. My sister lied to her social worker to have us investigated for child abuse and neglect, leading to our foster child being removed from our home even though the claims were found to be false. She also spread the gossip that we were being investigated, which hurt some friendships. That foster child, she got removed. Not only did she mess up that baby's life, she also destroyed my other kids because one day their sibling was home and the next gone with no warning. We had prepared them for foster kids leaving, but this foster child was within weeks of being adopted by us. To this day my sister maintains that she did the right thing because we didn't need more kids. My sister used to pee on me when we were kids. My dad accidentally pissed all over my face after a stag party. My uncle killed my aunt's lover by stabbing him to death in front of the man's children. That was pretty ducked up. My mother told my younger brother that his father killed himself in jail. Not only did he never go to jail, he's still alive. She's a real bag. Potentially murdered a man. My grandmother had 5 sisters. They were all super close. One of them got cancer. This was in the 1960s. They all decided not to tell the daughter, who was 12 at the time, of the sick one that her mother was dying because her father had just died a couple months prior. So the daughter just woke up one day and the mother had died. I mean, it's not completely ducked up, but it was a bad decision, I feel. My father is in prison for 5 years for sexual exploitation of a minor. Class 3 felony. After reading some of these, I've realized mine isn't so bad. But my uncle is Cecil Russell. A lot of what he's done is public. But he's done so many more terrible things. The two big ones are that when he was still just my aunt's swimming coach, when she was a teenager, mind you, he got her pregnant and destroyed her shot at the Olympics. He also participated in the murder of a man over steroids, something he continues to sell to this day, but was only ever charged with hiding the body. My father, who didn't want me and tried to get my mom to get an abortion, used to kidnap me and try to leave state with me while also trying to brainwash me into loving him. He never paid his child support, but when he did he'd come pick me up for the weekend and would drive as fast and as far as he could until my stepmother would catch on and stop him. The entire trip out he'd tell me about how my mother has never loved me. No one has. No one will, and that everyone in the family tries really hard to forget me and the horrible shame I brought on the family for being a bastard. He would tell me all about how my mom was a 40-year virgin who was terrible in bed. How she should be lucky he allowed her to have his child. How I should be so lucky that I'll look like him and not like a dirty beaner like my mom, which never made sense to me. She's Native American not Mexican and he knew that, so I never understood the racist comments because I didn't know what a beaner was at the time. He'd also scream about how much he hated me and wished he could take my birth back, but then he'd turn around and say I was the love of his life and that no one will ever love me as much as he does because he is my dad, so I have to love him. Found out many years later that it was the heroin and meth talking. For many reasons I never told my mom about these trips and she never found out. Edit. Wording to clarify that my father is racist and hates Mexicans and I didn't understand as a child. My mum started bleeding badly when she was 8ish months pregnant with my sister. Dad refused to take her to hospital. Sister died. My mum was diagnosed with leukemia. Dad went for sole custody. Mum passed. Dad moves in with her maid of honor, my mum's best friend of 30 years, who was executor of her estate, proceeded to drain what my mum had put aside for me. Eldest brother was looking at incest porn and my dad hit me for telling on him. As the sole female sibling in the house, I was terrified, but apparently it's just what boys do. Force me to sleep in a room alone with said brother for weeks to prove nothing would happen. Things happened. Father stabbed me in the ankle when I was 9. Kicked me out when I was 14. Lied about my other brother dying. Went so far as to put a plaque up on the tree he had supposedly crashed into. Eventually found out brother was alive. Father said he was hoping the incident would be enough for me to kill myself. When he kicked me out of home he told my entire family he was hoping I would get raped. I did. So twice my father put me in positions where I would be sexually assaulted. There's more, but suffice it to say when I had my daughter I swore I would never be anything like him. And I'm not. I ducking one. While suffering from postpartum depression my mother set me on fire when I was 26 days old. We don't have a relationship, but that's from the rest of my childhood, not this. My mother talked me into spending $84k out of my $89k inheritance to pay off her house for her, claiming she would pay me back. We got into it over my then boyfriend, now husband. She disowned me, claims she owes me nothing, and convinced my younger siblings to hate me, cut me off as well. Grandparents on my dad's side passed away and left me, my brother and my cousin $20,000 each in a trust fund to be given to each of us as we turned 21. I was the first, and my father refused to give it to me. I should mention at this point my parents are divorced, so my dad lives elsewhere, as apparently I hadn't earned it. Fine. Whatevs. Then my brother turned 21 last year, and again refused to give it to him. But since my brother is a hard-working individual, the haven't-handed excuse wouldn't fly, thus he revealed he had in fact spent all of our money paying off debts he owed for reason unbeknownst to us. Neither of us have spoken to him since then, even though he has tried once to contact me via Facebook. He claims he was within his legal right to do this. By the way, we took it up with a solicitor and it turns out no, he wasn't. It's fraud. Unfortunately our family doesn't have the money to take him to court, so not much we can do. Oh, and to top off the sit pie, my cousin turned 21 earlier this year and his father, my uncle, has pulled the same stunt my father has. Truly wonderful men. My uncles came by the house after my father died, got my mother, their sister, drunk, and then took a lot of my father's things with her drunken permission. Things that were meant for my brother and me. Those bastards. I never speak to them anymore for that reason. My dad helped my brother to save money for a year or so right after he finished high school, and my parents covered the cost of his living during this time. This was so my brother would be able to establish a solid foundation in life to go be on his own. My dad said it was in a joint bank account and that my brother would not be able to withdraw any money without our dad being present. For about a year or two, my brother's entire paychecks were going into this account and remaining untouched. Turns out my dad was using the money the whole time, buying motorcycles and other unnecessary purchases. He never told my brother until one day my brother asked for the money to move out. He stole over $15,000 from my brother, My cousin has 2 kids. Every time their birthdays come around she gets $600 from her not around so much dad, my uncle, and spends it to either pimp a ride or indulge in her booze weed habit. Her kids are 10 and 6. She's been racking up for years. My dad's mom was seriously emotionally abusive towards him and her husband, my grandfather. She was extremely religious and would claim that she got visions from God telling her what to do in order to manipulate my grandpa, who really had no idea how to deal with it. She would claim she would get a stigmata if my dad and his dad ever did something without her approval. She believed that my dad was destined to become a priest, and hated my mother once he married her, and hated that I was being born, since priests aren't supposed to have children. All of this is second hand from my parents, since she died of cancer before I was born. My grandpa is now married to the sweetest lady I've ever met who you'd never know isn't my real grandma if nobody told you. I'll try to make a long story short. My mom attempted to commit suicide shortly after Christmas 2013. She was put into a mental health facility for a week and then released. A couple of months later she attempted again and was put into the exact same mental health facility, but it was much more strict. My dumb cunt of an aunt went to visit her one night, and without talking to the rest of the family she decided she would sign off on my mother's release forms. Even more ridiculous, she told her that if she was ready to die that God was waiting for her with open arms. If I ever see my aunt again I will destroy her. No doubt this will be buried, but my older cousin got pregnant. Didn't tell anyone. Carried it for 9 months and had it at home in the bathtub while her mom and dad were at work. She then proceeded to put the baby in a black trash bag and throw it away at the high school cafeteria dumpster where her mom worked. The only reason anyone found out is because instead of cutting the umbilical cord she ripped it out along with the placenta, causing her to hemorrhage and pass out. The docs knew right away she had a baby. It all got swept under the rug cause of my grandmother's wealth and political ties.